What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Michael and welcome to FudgeMuppet. Here at FudgeMuppet, we're incredibly excited for Elder Scrolls 6, and if you've been following our channel, you can probably tell. We love to theorize about the Elder Scrolls 6 and discuss how we think aspects of this upcoming game could be implemented. We've been running a series called 5 Things We Want in Elder Scrolls 6, which I strongly recommend you check out. But in this video, I'm going to be talking about a handful of ideas that you want. And of course, when I say you, I'm simply referring to comments we've seen left frequently on our videos by Elder Scrolls fans who also want Elder Scrolls 6 to be a sensational game. So while it's obvious, I think it's still worth getting the point across that this video is definitely super subjective. Some of these ideas sound quite reasonable at first read and might be really cool if they were executed perfectly, but ultimately, after more consideration, the guys here at FudgeMuppet, including myself, think that the game would be best if these ideas weren't attempted by Bethesda for Elder Scrolls 6. That said, I'd love to hear your feedback and ideas, because thinking about all of these desires definitely isn't black and white, and I really enjoyed reading through the comments on part 1. Perhaps you'll change our minds and we'll make follow-up videos going really deep into even more possibilities with these ideas. So if you haven't realized, as the title says, this is part 2, with 4 more ideas we've considered and we'd love to talk about. I think the last topic on this list is probably the most controversial one. If you want a part 3, be sure to let us know, and if you want to hear the 4 original things we don't want, be sure to check out that video too, linked in the description. As always, thank you so much for watching FudgeMuppet, and now let's ride into this video on a dragon, or perhaps not, with the first thing on our list: a predefined, innately super powerful main character. This is something that many people want in Elder Scrolls 6, something to replace the Dragonborn main character, to play as a kind of chosen one. Without a doubt, playing as a Dragonborn and using dragon shouts in Skyrim was extremely fun, and it created an immersive power fantasy experience. I can definitely understand why people would want something similar in Elder Scrolls 6. For example, if the game is set in Hammerfell, you could be born as an avatar of Hoonding, and you innately learn the powers of using spirit sword techniques. Instead of using dragon shouts, you could have a list of these spirit sword powers, which also function with a cooldown bar and allow you to spice up your playstyle on the battlefield. There's no doubt this would be fun, so I see where this desire comes from. However, at the end of the day, we would prefer to start off as a nobody who becomes a somebody, as opposed to being worshipped at very early stages of the game. It also helps massively with role-playing that you feel that you can truly be who you chose to be, instead of having a grand identity forced upon you. For example, maybe I envision a character who is a master thief. I want to start off with no identity. The escaping prisoner motif actually works quite well, and I see no reason to change it. Being a prisoner gives you a clean slate. You then escape, giving yourself whatever backstory you want. In the case of a thief, I could say that I am a lowly peasant, destined for nothing but a life on the streets, who decided to travel around the province in search of adventure. Anything was better than being an urchin in some city. Stealing was a way to survive, so the character had some basic thief skills, but nothing special. Perhaps eventually you travel to a city and meet a rich man, only to hear his wealth was accumulated through running a criminal gang, and upon inquiring, you wind up conducting your own personal investigation, which leads you to join the Thieves Guild. You get a taste of riches and follow the trail until the desire for power and wealth consumes you, and you rise from peasant to master thief. This is your character's identity now, and yes, there will be a main story to follow that will somewhat define your character further, but you weren't forced to have a backstory you didn't want to. You weren't blessed upon birth by some Yakutan god destined to save the world with spirit sword powers. This way, if you do the main story and you do save the world, it's by your own choice and cultivated abilities, not because of your destiny. Sword singing could be something any character can learn, an ability to cultivate if you want to, but if my thief or my mage doesn't want to be involved with following such a path, they shouldn't have to. We don't want to have citizens admiring us for being something equivalent to the Dragonborn from early stages of the game, and instead prefer a more gradual and purposeful pace when it comes to role-playing and character development. Now, this isn't to say that you can't have any destiny at all whatsoever. There can be basic elements of prophecy without immediate power fantasy elements that still provide lots of role-playing freedom. For example, in Morrowind you were the Nerevarine, but you had to work hard without any innately potent abilities to become powerful and gain respect. This differs to Skyrim, where the ability to dragon shout is given to you almost instantly on a platter, and even if you want to be known as the most powerful wizard, army general, or thief, the world around you would fixate mostly on your predefined talents and status us as Dovahkiin. So in a nutshell, while Skyrim was super enjoyable, power feels better when you work for it, and it would be our preference in Elder Scrolls 6 to not be given superpowers with an identity to match unless we really earn it. Although we can obviously see why some of the fans do want to be given power straight away because it's fun. The next thing on this list would be really cool to mess around with when you feel like wiping out everything on the map. However, it does cause a lot of problems, and that is a super destructible environment. Many people would desire the ability to destroy much of the world in Elder Scrolls 6, be it fences, buildings, chests, crates, doors, maybe even entire homes or wall structures of forts and cities. This would definitely be fun to play with. Imagine being a mage fighting bandits on top of Valheim towers in Skyrim, and you shoot off a giant fireball on the bridge, blowing part of it to smithereens, and then watching the whole thing collapse and topple into the water below. It sounds incredibly cinematic and would make for some memorable moments. However, the Elder Scrolls 6 is not directed by Michael Bay, and while this idea definitely sounds cool, we think it causes way too many problems and we don't really want it in Elder Scrolls 6. If things can just be destroyed, it leads to a lot of complications for quests and other game mechanics. Let's just spitball a bunch of examples so we can see what I mean. Imagine if you were clearing out a bandit settlement in Skyrim, and then a dragon randomly showed up and used fire breath, tearing apart the only bridge there is to get across to the door you need to get inside for a certain quest, or just so you could fully explore the location. Or even assuming dragons don't randomly show up, imagine if some enemy mages shot fireballs your way and you dodged them, but then they burnt down the platform behind you, making your companion fall down to their doom with no way to follow a clear path back to you. Or imagine if instead of having to lockpick open a door, you could just hack and slash it down, or shoot a spell at a chest to blow it in half and gain access to what's inside. It diminishes the incentive for lockpicking, of course. Or even if you couldn't get what's inside if you destroyed a chest by force, imagine if you destroyed a big loot chest by accident at the end of a dungeon crawl while fighting a boss and throwing everything you have at them. It's a bit of a hassle. Can I just destroy alchemy tables and enchanting stations? What about towns and cities? If I just raze Whiterun to the ground, what then? How does it interfere with NPC pathing if their house is burnt down, or if a merchant's shopfront is burnt down? Sure, Bethesda could go and implement some very complicated AI schedules for every possible outcome caused by super destructible environments, but I don't think it's a realistic goal, and definitely not a goal that is worth the effort which they could spend on something more meaningful. And does this stuff respawn, and why does it respawn? Sure, you could roleplay that cities get rebuilt, but what about random forts in other locations? How does it make sense? What about trees or ice structures? Will they stay blown to pieces, or will they reappear back at full size again after a certain amount of time has passed? I'm not saying elements of destructibility aren't possible. I mean, in some ways they already exist in Skyrim, such as spiderwebs and wooden barricades. However, I think to take it to a massive scale, where most things in the game are destructible, causes too many problems. If you've listened to our ideas about full-scale wars and sieges, then in these moments, parts of cities, perhaps in high rock-based civil wars where it would make a lot of sense, could be destroyed. But that makes sense in these specific instances, and it makes sense if a kingdom spends resources to rebuild a main gate, or the corner of a lookout post or stone wall. In most cases, however, many structures on the map are ancient with really cool lore, and it won't make sense that a force is sent out to rebuild them exactly as they were. You can see why I'm generally opposed to taking big leaps to increase the destructibility of the environments in an Elder Scrolls game, but I'd love to hear how you'd implement it. Perhaps just small structures like fences and so on could be destroyed, and they do respawn eventually, and you just rationalize it being rebuilt in your head. Tell me what you think, but I think it's clear how too much of it would be a big problem, especially because it's not necessarily the responsibility of the player, as enemies can destroy important things during battle by accident as well. Alright, next up we've got a notorious element from Fallout 4, which was a whole lot of fun at times, but definitely damaged the quality of the game due to missed opportunity cost. What I'm talking about is the desire of having a Fallout 4 style settlement building system, where you can cover the province or provinces Elder Scrolls 6 is set in with your own personally crafted villages, towns, cities, or or however large you can take it. Now I think we can all agree that being able to get creative and construct super advanced settlements in Fallout 4 was a feature enjoyed by a lot of players, so I can see why some people would want it in Elder Scrolls 6. However, what we ultimately realized after Fallout 4 was that this feature of the game created a big problem which would carry over into an Elder Scrolls game too. That problem was that large-scale settlement building became too much of a focus, with every buildable settlement acting as an opportunity cost for a location which could have been handcrafted by Bethesda to be truly unique, with unique characters, additional fun side quests, new enemies, and even new powerful items to discover. So instead of being able to have all these new experiences and see all these cool things, much of it felt like Bethesda had told us, hey, here's another blank canvas, make something cool yourself. It also meant that much of the game was spent in a kind of junk collecting scrapathon mode, because you'd always be looking to break down items to get more junk to build more things with. In an ideal Fallout game, we'd want more Fallout and less Minecraft, and in an ideal Elder Scrolls game, we want more of the things that make us love the Elder Scrolls games already. Settlement building isn't one of those elements. If you've watched part 7 of our 5 things we want in Elder Scrolls 6 series, then you would have heard me talk about the potential to use a similar settlement building interface to create your own estate, kind of like Hearthfire but more customizable. We also don't want anything to have to be built from junk you go around and harvest all the time. I talk about this desire for a really long time in the part 7 video, which we'll have linked in the description for your convenience, as I don't have time in this video to run through exactly how we think Bethesda should pull it off. A keynote of importance, however, is just that we do not want the game to be built around settlement building at all. Even if you can build your own estate or a little tent hideout somewhere, Bethesda designers should never be thinking, maybe I should leave a blank space here in case someone wants to build a base. No, the entire game should be crafted as if settlement building doesn't exist, and then if small elements do, the player has to work to find an already existing location where they may want to build one small or grand settlement-like structure. But the moment building structures all over the place becomes possible and becomes a key component to an Elder Scrolls game, so much of what could have been a mind-blowing open-world RPG adventure experience is damaged. We don't want Elder Scrolls 6 to have a settlement building or crafting emphasis, and as I said in part 7, we also don't want it to be some rebuild a war-torn province with your own knightly faction and take over High Rock for yourself kind of game. Yes, we can see how it would fit well, which is why it's kind of scary to think of, but it comes at the expense of what makes an Elder Scrolls world good. The game would feel much deeper when you come across ancient tombs, built in the architectural style that fits in with the established lore, and has a background story to it, things to uncover and explore, more challenges, meeting characters with new quests and rewards to give, as opposed to just finding a rundown fort and having the option to put some custom-made flags on it and recruit generic peasant NPCs to farm some carrots. And yes, just because there could be lots of canvas-like settlements in a game, doesn't mean there won't be unique locations as well, but every single customizable settlement takes up another slot, which could have been a fleshed out, memorable location. We just want Elder Scrolls 6 to be a sensational open world RPG with so many cool things to do and see, and I'm sure you can see how adding settlements that need your help would probably be a bad idea. As you can see, there are some ideas where our stance is a lot stronger than others. We're strongly against a settlement building emphasis in Elder Scrolls 6, but when it comes to having the character innately gifted with some kind of superpowers, we're generally against the idea for certain reasons as I explained, but we still know the game would be enjoyable if it were implemented. Well, the last idea is more similar to that, and this is a desire that a lot of fans have, which I've got to be honest, sounds really, really cool. I've seen the idea get a lot of thumbs up in the comment section of the last video, so I know a lot of people would love it. With that in mind, please do know that we're not super against it, but we still think this desire causes a lot of complications in an Elder Scrolls game, and the game would likely be best without Bethesda spending effort implementing it. Introducing the climbing skill. Yes, that's right, the climbing skill. It's a feature implemented in Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall, and many fans would love to see it return, perhaps combining it with the acrobatic skill of previous games. First things first, we need to understand that just because something worked in an Elder Scrolls game before doesn't mean it will work this time, as new features and gameplay dynamics are added and changed. Here are a few examples. Look at unkillable NPCs. In Morrowind, everyone could be killed because they hardly moved around, so essentially the only person who could and would kill them was the player. Now move to Oblivion and then to Skyrim, where you have NPCs moving from place to place, where they could be easily killed by bandits or dragons, situations outside of the player's control. This is why they implemented unkillable important NPCs. It's the same deal with the removal of levitation as Elder Scrolls moved from Morrowind to Oblivion. Levitation would allow the player to get over walls of cities that require loading, or they could get into areas that break quest lines, and so on. Well, it's the same deal with the climbing skill. In Daggerfall, we have some pretty cardboard cutout houses and buildings, a product of the time but flat nonetheless. So this meant that the player could just walk to the 2D side of a building and just move up it. If you've seen it, it's not exactly epic. Obviously, when you move to later Elder Scrolls games with more 3D details, essentially Morrowind onwards, it's not as simple as walking up to a wall and climbing up it. I say climb, but it essentially looked like floating back in Daggerfall. So these days that wouldn't cut it, and so instead they would have to up their game. Now you could say, well, do it. Make it like Assassin's Creed. But this is where I think problems start to arise. We have mentioned before how opportunity cost factors in with the creation of games. Well, the amount of consideration and testing that would be required to build an Elder Scrolls game with parkour mechanics in mind is simply not worth it, in our opinion. For sure, you can point to games like Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Origins, but these are worlds entirely crafted around this type of movement. Arguably, the climbing features have become less interesting as of recent AC games, simply because there is less to climb on. The earlier AC games all had dense urban areas with thousands of unnamed NPCs for you to run around amongst. Elder Scrolls games, for the most part, are vast open landscapes or closed-in dungeons and caves. Take Elder Scrolls V Skyrim and imagine it had a climbing skill. Perhaps it has all the animations and looks just like Assassin's Creed. But where do you really use it? Most cities are spread out, maybe some areas of Riften, Solitude, Windhelm, and Markarth. Perhaps you climb Dragon's Reach, but then what? Maybe there is an odd fort you climb or a mountainside, but then what? It doesn't seem so impressive if you think about it. For sure, if Elder Scrolls 6 had all these sprawling urban cities filled with hundreds of buildings, it may be worthwhile, but I think the chances of that are slim. Consider other aspects of Assassin's Creed's design. They aren't the kind of games where you can just interact with every NPC, open every single door, leading you through a loading screen and an entire new room to explore. However, in Elder Scrolls, you generally can go into any room or building you want. You can find a way. The cities in Elder Scrolls are meant to be walked through, to be explored, to look at the details, speak to the people, not do hardcore parkour through 15 rooftops in 30 seconds. It's the difference between building a city as a jungle gym versus building it as a hub for quests, characters, and details. You can also think of other ways it can just kill the Elder Scrolls experience, and this is really important. So imagine you have to fight your way up inside all these cool tower dungeons doing a quest, like the Forsworn infested towers in the Reach, but instead you just climb up the outside and click on the door to the end dungeon room and just skip all the quest moments, all the necessary dialogue, and so on. Arguably, you could say, then change the game, make Elder Scrolls so it supports the climbing mechanics, but at this point you have to realize you are asking Elder Scrolls to be changed drastically in terms of quest layout, city layout, and dungeon layout, all because you want to be able to run up the side of a building as a Khajiit. You may as well just play Assassin's Creed. Movement is just not the main appeal of an Elder Scrolls game. It never has been. If Bethesda somehow could magically implement it all flawlessly and they somehow wanted a climbing mechanic that bad, then sure, I guess it could be an improvement, but that is unlikely. Anyway, since we are only hypothesizing and having fun, let's assume it is fully integrated and it works well and somehow doesn't compromise Bethesda's efforts on any of those core appeals of the Elder Scrolls franchise. Then how does it actually work as a skill? How is it valued? Would you really invest 13 perks into a skill that revolves solely around climbing? How useful is it really compared to investing 13 perk points in all kinds of magic or weapons or crafting skills? What does a climber with 10 in the skill look like compared to someone with 100 in the climbing skill? Overall, it seems to be such an opportunity cost with many conflicts to Bethesda's game design, but I'd love to know how you think it could be done. And with that said, said, we come to the end of another Elder Scrolls 6 video, exploring 4 desires we've read about in the comments section of previous videos that sounded quite decent at first, some of them, but eventually we thought wouldn't go so well. Thank you so much for tuning into FudgeMuppet, and as I said in the introduction, this has definitely been a super subjective video, so I'd love to read all of your thoughts and further ideas in the comments section below. I'd consider following up some of these ideas with individual topic videos that dive really deep if you convince me enough. Ultimately, Elder Scrolls 6 won't be released for a while, so we've got lots of time to think about exactly what we want and how Bethesda could pull it off before finally getting our hands on the game. Social media links can be found in the description section along with part 1. Remember to let me know if you want a part 3. My name is Michael, and I look forward to nerding out with you again very soon.